Thank you, KG. That was KG speaking, who you will see on the slide right now to your left, hopefully. That is Kamudi, or KG for short. We are going to go through a masterclass today where we talk about leadership in times of crisis. Leadership in times of crisis is a balancing act. There are a lot of different pieces of advice that you'll be giving, and well, some people may say, I've been through a few crises, this too shall pass. Yes, I certainly hope so. But right now what we're seeing is a gloomy picture like the clouds on this particular slide. Before we dive into the topic, I'd like to introduce MetaMind training to those of you who don't know us very well. What we do is we're a boutique training consultancy, and I call it a training consultancy because it is really about consulting to find the right solutions for you, to do the leadership transformation that is needed for you to be successful, to do the culture change that is necessary for you to be successful. Very often it's learning programs that we do as well. So you'll see the left side with our consulting projects and the right side with our training programs. What it has in common is that we focus a lot on authenticity, authentic leadership, values, vision. You will see that in all activities that we do. You will also see at the bottom, I have described how we deliver it. We're not focusing very much on tools. We are focusing on how to deliver the best solution, disregarding of tools, whether it is the consulting approach, whether it's coaching, mentoring, training. That is not the most important part. This is a team, and we all have our careers behind us, different careers. So what we have in common is that we are delivering training, learning, consulting to bring out the best in you. This is what we are joining forces to do. We have had our careers behind us, and we are so passionate about bringing the best out in you, in your teams, in your company. That's what we are about. To the topic of today, leadership in times of crisis. It is a balancing act. If you have been listening to some of the advice that has been given recently, it's a lot of conflicting and contradicting advice. Sometimes it's just a balancing act, sometimes it's contradicting. Let's take, for instance, the thoughtful risk management that you're advised to do. And at the same time, you're also advised to have courage and take bold action. How does this go hand in hand? Well, it's a balancing act. What about focusing on core competency? And at the same time, it's also about trying out something new. What about ensuring survival? And at the same time, grabbing opportunities? Or prioritizing and focus, whilst at the same time you need to be flexible for a situation that changes daily. And here in Singapore, we have been having situations that change daily since the beginning of the year. We've been through this for the past few months already. In other parts of the world, it may only have been the past few weeks. And especially for our business, where we're in the face-to-face people business, whether we are facilitating strategy workshops, learning workshops, doing talks, it is about face-to-face meeting people. And all of a sudden we were told we cannot meet with more than 10 people. Well, that is a big change in how we deal with our daily business. Then it is about short-term fixes. And at the same time, we're also told all the time, focus on the long term, right? It is about controlling the chaos. And how do you do that? With systems. And on the other hand, it's also about allowing the flexibility for speed. What about not overreacting? And what about not underreacting? Well, this is a tricky one. In hindsight, I'm sure that in 1 or 2 years' time, we will have a lot more information. We will be a lot wiser, and we know when it was overreacting and underreacting. But right now, we don't know what actions to take, whether the social distancing, should we be having even stricter rules, or will this destroy the economy? What is the overreacting and what's the underreacting, and where is the balance? Tricky question. What about realism and optimism? On the one hand, you're asked to stay real, be realistic. And on the other hand, I've heard also the advice of you need to show unbounded optimism. Really be there for your teams with all the optimism you can gather together. How does that match? How do you get this balancing act right? And what about you're busier than ever? You are working on plan A, B, and C at the same time. And then you also want to be available to the team. You have a need to communicate. They have a need to be communicated with. How do you balance that? Then there is, of course, insecurity about the future. You may also be insecure about the future. And then there is this increased need and desire for transparency and perspective. And they want you to have decisiveness and leadership when you might not even have the clarity yourself because you're insecure about the future. What about the care for the organization and care for the bottom line on the one hand? And on the other hand, well, you may want to show care and compassion for people as well. A tricky one, layoffs. What about when there are layoffs? How do you deal with these? You may want to show compassion. Maybe that's also part of what your company wants to do. But how do you balance these different dilemmas? It is about getting the balance right. And I do not have a one-fits-all answer to this. I do not have the solution to how you get the balancing act right at all times. I do have one very important piece of advice that will help you sleep much better at night because you will take the right decisions. It is about values. It is about your core values that you look at in order to take the decisions. When you are aware of your own personal values, that is when you will have a guiding light or a compass, as on this picture, to help you take those very tough decisions that we all are going through right now. We are surrounded by a lot of different value systems. We use the words very randomly. I value friendships. I value a good meal. I value free education. And we have so many different value systems around us, like, for instance, the spiritual one that's mentioned on this slide. Religions, spiritual directions all over the world, they have their value systems, and luckily they're quite similar. So if they weren't so similar, we would probably have a lot more wars in the world than we already have and have had. Then there is the country values. If you look at countries such as an East Asian country, Japan perhaps, Japan values collectivism. And if you look at Anglo-Saxon countries value individualism very much. So also different value systems in different parts of the world. Then there are different family value systems. When you grow up as a child, your family for sure has had some values that they were consciously or not so consciously educating you by. Now, when you are starting your own family, these values might change. I value very strongly independence of my children. So I teach children at a very young age to take their own decisions. And if they ask, hey, mommy, can I go out tonight? And they have school the next day, I will answer back, well, do you think that's a good idea? What is your decision? And if they say, yeah, I'm going to go out, then the answer is, well, as long as you live with the consequences as well. Other parents might have a very big concern about safety. I want to make sure that my kids don't go out at night and stay safe. And I want a different value system. I want my kids to be really, really good at school and succeed, so they cannot go out at night. Different value systems. Nothing is right or wrong with these value systems. I see values as having positive value in their own rights. It's not right or wrong. It's about what have you decided upon as your value system. The next one. I have a bit of a ambiguous relationship with corporate values. And one story that I'd like to share with you is that one prospective client that I was going to see, I had done my homework as one does and looked up what they're like. the values on the internet were really inspirational to me. I was inspired by it, and I thought, I want to work with this company. On top of it, it's a financial institution, and financial institutions are not always that great with their values. I came into the meeting, and there was Bill, head of HR, and let's call him Bill. He's not his real name in real life. So there was Bill, and I said, yeah, I'm so excited about seeing you here today, and I'd love to work together. Your values truly inspire me. Guess what his answer was? That's just the marketing department. That's just words on the internet. I am very disappointed when I hear these words, or when I see companies where values are simply just some words on the wall. Values are very, very powerful. When you have values that inspire other people, you will unleash energy in them to do extraordinary things. And for corporate values, it's so important because you will attract people with the same value system if you communicate values that are truly lived. And that's why values can be so powerful. I have an example of a company who also had a value system. And as I reveal more and more information, feel free to see if you can guess what this company is. Feel free to put it in the chat box. Unfortunately, I cannot see it as long as I'm sharing the screen. I will slowly but surely reveal some information. So this company had a value system that said respect, integrity, communication, and excellence is important to us. If you're right now thinking, hey, my company has the same values, then it's not very surprising, because a lot of these values, they are the bare necessities of being a successful company in your industry, of being an industry leader. Now, this particular company was headquartered in the US, in Houston, to be more precise. In 2001, October, it was revealed that they had hidden a lot of losses, huge losses, in SPVs, in special purpose vehicles. Now, the year after, in 2002, they took down their accounting firm with them, a very large accounting firm. And perhaps somebody has already typed into the chat box what this company was. The accounting firm was Arthur Andersen, and it was Enron, who had these particular values that they said they were living by. Really? Is it respect to hide losses? Is that integrity? Is that communication? Is that excellence? Well, excellence in hiding losses, but not on the long term, as you also saw. What I would like to focus on today is not just the corporate values, but also your core values. Very often in workshops, I'm asked, well, what are core values? Values, your core values are the principles and the concept that are the most important to you. When I asked a participant in a workshop to define core values, she said, core values, my core values are, when I take away the labels, when I take away the label of lawyer, MBA, mother, wife, sister, daughter, friends, you take away all these different labels. What's left, that is my core values. I found it a beautiful way of describing it, and that's also why I've chosen this picture that shows vulnerability, because it does leave people vulnerable at first. I'm thinking of a retired person that I spoke to not so long ago, and he still introduced himself as, I used to work for company so-and-so in position so-and-so, and he was retired. Some of our coachees also have difficulties seeing a world beyond corporate life, because they feel that the corporate entity is a part of their identity. Core values are the concept, the principles that are the most important to you, that you do not want to compromise on, and they identify you. It's core, it's a core part of your identity. Do you know what your core values are? When I ask this in live workshops, and I ask people to put up their hands if they know them, sometimes only a few hands go up. In fact, when I started this journey 6 years ago, there were sometimes only about 1 or 2 hands that went up sometimes. Along the way, I see up to half of the room raise their hands. What I also think is interesting is that when I work with entrepreneurs, more hands go up. And when I work with women, also more hands tend to go up. Interestingly enough, also, when I work with younger people, they also seem to be much more connected to their core values than the baby boomers and Generation X, us, are. Before we do an exercise on finding your core values, I would like to share some of my core values with you to give a better understanding of what are these values. For me, one thing that's very important is growth. Personal growth, professional growth. I'm a learning junkie. I have always been going to seminar after seminar. Right now, I am on my learning app, learning a language. I am doing a certificate in this and that and what have you. I am so much into learning. I love reading. This is just a very big part of me. Now, it's not just about myself. It's also about empowering others in the growth and learning journey. That's, of course, why I founded a training consultancy 6-7 years ago when I left corporate life. What I would also like to share with you is another value, which is respect. And in fact, the picture here is misleading on purpose because respect can mean a lot of different things to different people. On this picture, you see somebody who is doing some ceremony. It's some routine, some habits that different cultures have. That's not what I mean by respect. It's not greeting in a specific manner. When I talk about respect as a value, what's important to me is that we respect people's wants and needs. I want my wants and needs to be respected, and I also want to respect other people's wants and needs. The reason why I'm explaining this is that it shows that very often these words are just labels, like they were at Enron. What's important is that you breathe life into it. Tell stories around what is it that respect means to you? What is it? What kind of behavior is it that we expect from our employees when we talk about respect? Different people have different interpretations. The last one that I want to add is variety. And I add this one because it's one of the values that I found out very recently, how important it was to me, in fact. And in my life, I like to do different things all the time. That's also one of the reasons why, as a company, we're not focusing on one tool. I would get bored if I would just do one masterclass after the other. I want to do a masterclass today. I want to do coaching tomorrow. I want to have a workshop and facilitate and speak and write books. I want all this variety in my life. Those are my values. Now I'm going to do a quick exercise with you. If you already know your values, take it as an exercise, just like I discovered something along the way, to review, are those still my values or is there something new to be learned? If you don't know what your values are, if you don't have an immediate spontaneous reaction to that, do the next exercise with your intuition, please. Because words will be coming at you and they're coming at you at a quite fast speed. You will not have time to think about these rationally. Think about them on an intuitive level. Take them in, taste them, feel them, hear them, whatever your preference is, and take note. Take a sheet of paper, take note of the values where you feel, yeah, that kind of sounds right, or that kind of feels right. Are you ready for the exercise? Make sure to do it on an intuitive level, or you will not be able to catch up with the different words that are going to come at you very, very quickly now. All right. I hope there were some words that spoke to you on an intuitive level. Usually what I do at this point of time is that I ask people to think about them on their commute back home, but I assume that most of you these days are actually already at home, as we're confined to work from home, most of us. What I would like you to do is to take note of these and consider them, perhaps right after this webinar, perhaps tonight, perhaps over the weekend. Think about, how are they part of your life today? And is there anything you can do to make them a bigger part of your life going forward? Can you design your life around them? I've designed my life around my values. Is there something you can do to take decisions in a different way? Actually, decisions is a great way to keep on exploring your values. When I work with coaching clients, it takes sometimes an hour, sometimes 3 months or longer to define core values, personal core values. So if you haven't really defined them in this short exercise, I'm not surprised. What is a good way forward is to think about, what decisions did I take today? Did they reflect my values? And if not, why not? When we have dilemmas that we're faced with, like all the different dilemmas that I showed in the beginning, where you don't know what way to go, it's usually because there is a conflict of values going on. When we have different things that are equally important to us, that is when we may not take a decision as quickly as other decisions. Think about it going forwards. Afterwards, on a daily basis, if you think about, how did I live my values today? How can I live them stronger going forward tomorrow? You will very quickly get a very good feeling of what are the concepts and principles that are the most important to you in your life. This is what is key to authenticity. It is when you have a high awareness about what is important to you and you live these on a daily basis. It's the congruency. It's the consistency, living it every single day, that makes you authentic. Some people believe that authenticity is about, when I have a presentation, I show a picture of my family, my dog, my 3 kids, and that makes me authentic, right? Sorry. In my view, that does not make you authentic. It shows a little part of your private life in a professional setting. Does it make you authentic? Not necessarily. If you show that you live your values in the same way in your family as you do in your professional life, now that makes you authentic. Authenticity is a topic for another masterclass, so that's all I will share about authenticity today. What I will focus a little bit more on is the trust, though, that comes with the congruency. I'm Danish by birth. I grew up in the Netherlands, and in Dutch, Dutch is what they speak in the Netherlands. There is a saying that is, trust comes on foot and it leaves on horseback. So it comes very slow and it can gallop away in a moment. I love this saying. It's there's also this Gottman 5-to-1 ratio that says, when you make one mistake, you need to do 5 good things in order to make up for it. Other people say it's rather a 10-to-1 ratio. I would say that's probably depending on how big your blunder was and the impact of it. What's important to note here is that when you make mistakes, when you do things that are not congruent with your leadership perception, trust is lost. Crisis is a time where leadership perceptions are made or lost. There is a person that I interviewed for my upcoming book on authentic leadership. He describes culture as it is the lowest denominator of behavior that your organization is accepting. Culture is, well, leadership also. Your leadership is defined by the lowest level of behavior that you accept and the lowest level of behavior that you demonstrate. Culture is a time where our leadership is put to a test. So congruency will keep the trust and will keep your leadership perception in the positive range. Crisis is where leadership perceptions are made or lost. I love this quote by Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, for those dialing in from outside of Singapore. He passed away some years ago. He's still seen as a very competent leader. And he is told by fellow Singapore or by Singaporean friends that I have that he said repeatedly, we may not always have taken the right decisions, but they were always taken with the right intent. I have not been able to find this online. Several Singaporeans have confirmed, yes, this is very much Lee Kuan Yew. I love this because it shows he was a very visionary leader, and he was leading with values. He had a strong value system. He had an intent that was based on strong values. So yes, he's admitting that sometimes in hindsight, it was not the right decision that he took or that the government took, but it was made with the right intent. When you do this, you are perceived as a strong leader, especially when we get out of the crisis. I would like to do a short thought experiment with you. And on this slide, I promise you, usually I'm not a Facebook cute puppy poster, but I thought today, let's not have more pictures of groom and doom. I would like to discuss layoffs. When you have that dilemma of layoffs on the one hand, and on the other hand, that you want to show compassion, that you want to be there for your team, or maybe it's care for employees as part of your company's value system, whether it's your company's or your personal value system. What do you do with this kind of dilemma? Going back to values, using your values as a compass, that is where the answer is to be found. If we look at my values, for instance, like if somebody were to manage me, in fact, I lived in Germany during one of the last crises, and in Germany, during crisis, typically employees are given the option to take 1 week off a month that's unpaid to do something else, or jointly collectively people will take pay cuts or reduce working hours in one way or the other. Now, because I am a learning junkie, in a situation like that, I would go, heck yeah, I'll take a year off unpaid to go and write my PhD. That is how you can make, as a boss, you can balance the two different challenging situations of being asked to lay off people and also showing compassion for employees, looking at what is it that this particular employee needs and wants. Now, there's not a one-fits-all answer to this. In fact, I would like you to right now, if you have any ideas of what to do in this situation, write it in the chat box and Katie will keep an eye on it. And at the end of this, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll also go through some of these suggestions. Now, what do I do as a leader in these times? First of all, it's about staying realistic and transparent about what the situation is like. And of course, keeping the optimism. I am an optimistic person, and I stay true also to my belief in that this too shall pass. And we have a lot of different ways of making this as positive as possible for everybody involved. Now, there are also people in my ecosystem who are facing tougher times. And of course, I do everything that's in my power to make sure that their needs are also met, that their wants and needs are respected. The good thing about values is that if you realize that I have done what I can in this circumstance, at some point of time, there might be a hard end to things. Money is not endless. If we get into a depression, definitely companies will be hurt, and there may be some very difficult decisions to take at some point of time, right? Now, if you take your values as a guiding light and you have been staying true to all of this, then you will have the trust and the empathy from your teams as well. And they will know that you have done whatever you could in the situation. And you will also sleep a lot more soundly at night when you know that you have done what is in your power to help people out and meet their wants and needs. So there's not a one right answer to this, in my view. There is one thing maybe that is very valid, and that is you will not find any leadership gurus today who will say that you can just be autocratic and you can do whatever you want and you can just cut your way through. And modern leadership gurus, they do say that compassion and empathy, that is part of modern leadership. You will not be able to be successful without the empathy and the compassion, the care of your employees. Apart from that, there's not a one-fits-all solution. It's very much about how is it that you can take the right decision for you and your company. Also remember the decision or the values of your company. We'll get back to that in a little while. I would like to mention one thing first, and that is it's about getting the balance right. I like this picture because there's also this helping hand that's being extended. The helping hand is because very often getting the balance right ourselves, we don't know exactly what is the right balance. If you are like most other people, and certainly like me, you will sometimes have voices that say you can do things or you can't do things, or you have those little voices in your mind, right? And sometimes we also go in circles with the same thoughts. Sometimes we don't dive deep enough to find the truth in ourselves. And that is where coaching can come in. That we are having a neutral party who will hold us accountable and challenge us to go deeper. Coaching can be a lot of different things. A lot of people see it also at one-on-one training or mentoring. When I talk about coaching today, I talk about helping you to find clarity, having that lending, helping hand to guide you to find clarity. It's about being this neutral party, the non-judgmental party, who will also challenge you to find the right answer, the answers that are right for your situation, your company, today's time, and also the value systems that you represent. We have a team of coaches at MetaMind Training. There's Ivana, who's a psychologist. There's Axel, KG, and myself as executive coaches. We'd love to take you through some of these uncertain times. And I'll like to share a couple of the things that we can offer you right now before we go into the Q&A session. We offer a 20-minute free discovery session on a first-come, first-served basis. Of course, we are setting our time, and that's one of the things that is finite in our lives. We will also have one more masterclass coming up. You can already now put it in your calendars. It will be KG, who was starting the call earlier and who will come back to you in a minute, where we'll be discussing about how to lead with empathy in these uncertain times. That will be Thursday, 9th of April, 8 p.m. And we have extensive online learning programs. We will be sending this and some free tools to you after this masterclass. With that, let's take some questions. I will stop sharing my presentation, and I would like to ask KG Kamudi to facilitate with some of the questions that have been coming up. Let's take some questions here.
Thank you for that, Mette. We have Anil up first. Anil, I'm going to unmute you so that you can share what you shared earlier. Good question. Anil, would you like to?
Do you have the question? Then you can perhaps read it aloud, KG.
Sure. So it's from Anil Mehta, and his question is.
No, sorry, I pressed the unmute button.
There you go.
Anil, would you like to share the comment you had earlier when Mette was talking about the values?
Well, as I wrote a while ago, in India, there is a different system of values. Here, in my mind, the only value which matters is how to make money by any means, fair or foul. But to my mind, the most important value, and to some extent which you spoke about also, is integrity, because it is integrity which helps to build trust, and is the most important thing, followed by health of yourself and family. Money is possibly the least important. It follows the own due course. We being of a different religion, to us, karma is most important. You do right karma, everything will happen. I hope you understand the meaning of karma is actions, good actions or bad actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, because that is one of the things that people are discovering right now in these times, right? That money in the end, yes, of course, we want to take care of our families, and that's important as well. And money is a means to do a lot of different things. In fact, it is health of family and loved ones that turns out to be really, really important right now. So thank you very much for sharing that. Yes, absolutely.
We have a question from Sylvia. Sylvia, would you like to share the question with the group, or would you like me to?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mette. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well, Sylvia.
So just my question is, when you do the values exercise, Mette, what would be a good way to narrow the list down? Like in my case, as you started showing things on screen, I had like 15 already. How did you do that exercise?
Okay, it is in workshops. I have some exercises where I force people to choose between different values, and I do have a free values test online where I'm also asking you to do this. What you can do right now is simply take them, list them all up, and then choose between 1 and 2, and choose between 3 and 4, choose between 5 and 6, and do it all. When I do this in workshops, I get people swearing at me and say, are you going to let me choose between my wife and my children? That's what happens sometimes. Of course, we're not asking you to leave out others. Even if you on the priority list leave out one thing, it doesn't mean that you're going to cut them out of your life just because you're striking them off the list. It is a great exercise though in thinking about, why am I choosing A over B? Why am I choosing friendship over say work? Or why am I choosing work over friendship? People actually have these conversations with themselves. They have these choices to make. When you are choosing between the two words, all of a sudden you will realize you can boil it down to a few that are core in your life. And it may be work, it may be friends, and there's nothing right or wrong about it. It simply means that you will get self-fulfillment through work by enriching other people's lives in one or the other way, rather than the social aspect. And that's absolutely okay. So what I can invite you to do is to choose between the first two, the next two, and then after you have half the list, do it one more time, half the list one more time, until you end up with 2, and see what that means to you, and see how you live these right now.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you, Mette.
You're welcome. Other questions?
We have a question from Prashant Joshi. Prashant, would you like to share your question, please? Prashant, I've unmuted you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to know, like sometimes when we don't have like our core values written down and we take decision based on our conscious. So how do you interpret this approach?
Very often we intuitively know what our values are. And when it intuitively seems right to do, that's what we follow. Now, sometimes we face dilemmas, and when we can take it out of intuition, I'm a very strong believer in intuition. I see intuition as a wealth of experiences that we store somewhere deep down, so that our brain on a daily basis can function better by storing less information. So it is experiences that you have, your intuition. And that means that, of course, you know what's right and wrong for you. I do believe in the power. I see that with coaching clients, when you put words on it. because that's when you can take them as a compass when there are difficult decisions to be made, as there are right now. How are you going to show up as a leader in today's uncertain times? When you have the values right there in front of you, when it is something like compassion or care for other people or empathy, are you showing this in your decisions? Most people, or a lot of people, do have something that is related to this human empathy side. How are you showing up as this, like this in today's time, right? So with the values, you can make better conscious choices than you will when it's simply intuitive.
Thank you, Mette. We have a comment or an insight from Saish. Saish, I've unmuted you. Would you like to share?
Yeah, hi. I just want to say that the values, can they change with the circumstances? In the current crisis we have, everybody says health will be a top priority of the values, or you might say empathy is the value which you have. But maybe 1 year down the line, when the crisis goes away, these may not be the same values, or you may not identify with those values anymore after 1 year. So do values change with time and circumstances, or are they such a core values that they don't change at all?
I do believe that we have core values that don't change so much over time, but of course you live them in different ways at different times. And right now we all of a sudden realize that money is not as important as our health. At least a lot of us are going through these thoughts right now. A lot of us are focusing much more on health than we have until just a few weeks ago. So I'm quite convinced that a lot of us value health quite a bit right from the onset. It's a prerequisite for us to do a lot of the other things. So I'm not going to give you a black and white answer on this. I do believe that values are fairly robust throughout your lifetime. Now, when your life situation changes, you will focus on different things. Your focus may become different. And also along the way, when you learn, you get new experiences. I'm pretty sure that my values were not the same when I was a teenager as they are today. I've learned along the way. And with the maturity also comes a focus on, hey, I realized that other things are more important in my life than I realized when I was partying and having fun as a teenager.
Mette, we have another question and they wish to be anonymous. The concern is that they're unable to relate to their corporate values right now and they feel uncomfortable walking away from their job. So do you have any advice for them?
That's a good one. So uncomfortable walking away from their jobs. There's many different reasons why you may feel uncomfortable walking away from your jobs. And of course, right now, it's tough times. It's not so easy to get new jobs. I have coachees right now who were over the past few months already contemplating, is this the right company for me? Because I do not feel a strong connection with the values of the company. I do not feel that this is the right position for me. So there's two things to it. First of all, if you don't feel connected to your the corporate values of the company that you work for, or the values that your boss is demonstrating, you're probably not performing at your best. Because when you live your values, that is when your passion gets ignited. And that's when you get a lot of energy to do extraordinary things. And if that is missing, you're probably one of the more than half of the world's population who's disengaged at the workplace. Different surveys show that there's more people who are disengaged than engaged at the workplace. So whenever HR people ask me, hey, when we do your values workshop and people turn out to have different values, what do we do? And I say, well, that's probably good to find out now, because then you know that you should be parting ways, right? That you're not made for each other. You're probably one of the people who's disengaged. Now, the other side is to it that maybe you want to stick with things right now. It's your decision. It's depending on your life circumstances and your values. If safety and security for your family, feeding your family, making sure that your family can live without worries, that might also be a value that you have. If that is something you value, then maybe you don't want to quit your job right now. So it's money is playing a secondary role. It's about a means to achieve some of the other values you may have. So in this case, money is a means to providing for your family, and that's absolutely okay to focus on that if that's important to you. I hope that answers the question. Anything else, KG?
We have Anil with a comment. Anil?
Yeah, I have a question. You raised a subject on passion versus layoffs. Today, almost everybody is under stress, whether it is the individuals. The daily wage earner is even under bigger stress because he doesn't even know whether he will be able to survive the next day without food or water unless there is the government or the NGOs step in and help them. The corporations and the businesses are also under a lot of stress because they are not making money, they are not manufacturing anything, and yet they've been required by the government to pay the employees and not lay off anyone. Now the question is that the organizations will need to survive to be able to pay those employees. So what is the extent of passion that the organization should have, and what is the extent of layoffs? Rather, I would say that that has to be minimized. So should there be a pay cut, a haircut in the pay to the extent of, let's say, 75%, starting right from the seniority takes the senior people takes the biggest hit, and to the extent that everybody, let's say, survives just on 2 meals so that everybody gets that kind of money. What is the approach that a corporation or a distressed organization should take? Thank you.
I believe there are several questions in what you asked. So the first part of your question was more towards, well, leaders right now are put to a test. Your leadership competencies are put to a test. And I can very much relate to that myself as well. We are working harder than ever. And at the same time, we need to produce new products. We need to go online. And at the same time, we also need to be there for our staff, because we can only keep our staff going if we're also there for our staff. So yes, in these times, we need to be powerful as leaders. Where some people say you need to be optimistic as a leader, I believe that you need to gather all your strengths. And the more you live according to your values, the easier it is to gather your strengths. When you do the things when you know that you're doing the right thing, it's easier to have strength than when you are a little bit in doubt whether you're doing the right thing. So that's the first part of what you were saying, that yes, right now leadership is put to a test. It is tough. And you will also see lots of description online in scientific articles that leaders are recognized by difficult times rather than by easy times. Leadership reputations are lost or made during times of crisis. Now, the other thing that you're saying is, at some point of time when it does come to layoffs, there's not a right or wrong question to this. It depends on the situation. It's your best estimate. If you believe that right now the crisis will go on for this long, and you have enough money to survive for that long, and you're convinced that you can keep on doing what you're doing today and get through the crisis, then that could be your decision of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If you already now see that there's going to be big trouble ahead, then it's important to act immediately and be the compassionate leader already now. Be foresighted, look long-term, see what short-term fixes you can have. This is where you need to have the balancing act. And there's not a right or wrong answer that applies to all companies. There is your best estimate right now. And that's where you can, I would highly recommend you to get somebody who you can have these conversations with. A lot of the leaders that I work with, I facilitate some networking groups with executive leaders. And the number of times that I hear it's lonely at the top. You know, even having lunch with employees, they don't feel comfortable if I go out with them for lunch all the time because I'm the boss. I hear that I can't even share this with my team because they are also affected. That's where it's good to have a great network or some coaches who will have a neutral perspective and who will guide you through what is the best to do in this situation. You know it because you know your company, you know your industry, you know your situation. Yes, there are a lot of insecurities and unknown as well. But a coach, a neutral party can guide you through so that you take the decisions that you feel comfortable with. When you have taken a decision and you say, all right, this is the best I can do right now, that's when you can sleep better at night.
Yeah, I know. That's okay.
Thank you for that, Mette. That's all the questions we have time for today.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us today. Do join us on April 8th, it was, I believe, for our next sessions with KG, where we're focusing on the empathy that we would love you to show your staff. Have a great Friday and see you next time.